Exploration of Edenic imagery and symbolism of the expulsion from Eden and the fall of man in romantic nature poetry. What is the Edenic, and why did the Romantics care about it? The Edenic refers to the Garden of Eden, the biblical paradise of Genesis, which was the home of the first humans, Eve and Adam, animals and nature, all of which were at one with God. In poetry, symbols of the Edenic or Edenic illusions are images, metaphors, or references which draw upon this biblical image of humankind's origins. Jonathan Penny argues the Edenic was used by the Romantics because of one of the defining preoccupations of the Romantics, and of the Romantic poets in particular, is the idea that God reveals himself to the human most palpably in a natural setting. Penny also suggests the Edenic was used to redivert our gaze from the heavens to the earth's own surface, by which Edenic illusion appears in Romantic poetry to praise the beauty which is all around us. Moreover, Stephen H. Collin suggests the Romantic fascination with the Edenic arises from the feeling that we are living in a world which is incomplete, in which is introduced the idea of the significance of the expulsion from Eden, which we will return to later. Now, with an understanding then of what the Edenic is and why it may have been of value to Romantic art, we can explore some specific examples in Romantic poetry. In his poem I Am, Clare expresses a frustration and disharmony of belonging. Written while he was in an asylum, the poem echoes a hopelessness. Clare's expressions of confinement are matter of fact, and the reason for this emerges in the poem from the comfort and the solace found in the Edenic images of nature without boundaries and peaceful childlike rest. Clare's longing for scenes where man has never trod nurtures the Edenic image of an untamed wilderness which promises beauty and proximity to God. As Penny suggests, for the Romantic poets, to experience the world in its wildness was to experience God in his wildness. Clare longs for this wildness, and Eric Robinson remarks, Clare often saw the natural landscape through a lens of Bible pictures, due to his deep reverence for the Bible and a love of the church based in his childhood, his family, and his village community. Within Clare's nostalgic yearning for childlike rest, we see the sentiments of the pastoral genre. As Collin recognises, the perfect pastoral vision is captured by Milton, who saw the human pair in Eden where all things that breathe, from the earth's great altar, send up silent praise to the Creator. The Edenic accompanies and embodies these images of youth and innocence, depicting the time before the fall of man in the sweet peaceful rest. Where Clare's devotion and simple faith rooted him in an appreciation for religious sentiments, Byron is an example of deviance. Though he would use biblical allusion in a romantic manner which marvels the powers of nature and creation, Byron's poetry found itself more concerned with the warnings of the Bible and the commentaries on humankind, revealing more so the earthly implications of the Edenic. Therefore, Byron's exploration of the Edenic in darkness depicts the beginning of the end. Rather than drawing upon the heavenly paradisical images of Eden, Byron finds inspiration in the symbols of looming temptation and chaos. The poem presents an absence of the often portrayed homely and peaceful Edenic in an apocalyptic scene. The key Edenic image which Byron explores is that of the serpent, the tempter and embodied evil which encourages Eve and Adam to eat from the forbidden tree of knowledge. In this illusion of the vipers, Byron reflects the looming threat of self-inflicted destruction which appears throughout the poem, the act of crawling alluding to the law that snakes had legs in Eden which they were stripped of after the consumption of the fruit and the expulsion of Eve and Adam, the action of twining alluding to popular artistic depictions of the serpent in the tree of knowledge, yet the looming chaos Byron's viper encircles is humankind. Of course, as was the case with Eve and Adam in the Garden of Eden, there is no longing for home or recognition of sin without expulsion from paradise. These poems explore the flaws and failures of humankind as much as a longing for escape or return to safety. Where the Edenic encourages awe for the beauty and intricacies of nature, the symbolism of the expulsion from Eden serves a different purpose in Romantic poetry. It is a device by which Romanticism was able to also thrive in the political sphere. These romantic poems aim to do more than appreciate one's surroundings. They also hold criticism for the ways of the fallen world and the trespasses of man. As Colin expresses, the fall of man is the symbol of the cause of the disorder that we would wish reordered. Thus, in the poetic symbolism of the fall of man, the focus shifts from exploring nature to interrogating human nature, and how the latter acts as a boundary between humankind and our environment. Though the symbolism of the fall of man is about figurative sin and trespass, Clare concerned himself with debates on the physical act of trespass and the political significance it held. Clare's frustrations stem from a society of enclosure, where country fields and public land were becoming private property or areas of restricted access. The impact of this enclosure far transcends mere divisions of land. It infiltrates the mind and emotion, strengthening the divide between humankind and nature until there are no scenes where man has never trod, and all is corrupted by the enforced boundaries of humankind. Darkness as a poem of hopelessness, chaos, and destruction vividly illustrates humankind's expulsion from Eden and the sins of earthly man. It must also be considered, though, that Byron himself was a worldly man, not bound and encouraged by religious belief and faith like Clare. However, as enlightened by Kennedy, Byron's prejudice against religion was founded principally upon the faults of people. In the motif of fire and light, we see a Promethean narrative, through which Byron comments on the selfishness and arrogance of humankind. Byron depicts an irony in this motif of light, with its ties with enlightenment and knowledge. Byron depicts forest fires and burning villages to envision fire and its symbolism of knowledge, out of control. Byron criticizes the ego of man as the reason for the expulsion from Eden, and the reason for humankind's inevitable destruction. Penny argues that the romantic depictions of the apocalyptic illustrated that the apocalyptic was already one of the world. It could then be further said that Byron, through the chaos and destruction of the poem, depicts the true chaos of the world, particularly the chaos the Romantics envisioned would be inevitable in an ever-growing industrial society devoid of community and faith, instead replaced by individuality and hubris. Ultimately, Clare and Byron, through the symbolism of Eden and humankind's expulsion from it, comment on the boundaries we create which distance us from a union with nature. Clare uses the Edenic in exploration of his frustrations with the ever-increasing belief of humankind that we can own and enclose the land which we are blessed to live on. The fall for Clare is then rooted in this selfishness and unnatural human-imposed order which disregards the opportunities for freedom and peace within nature untethered. Byron too uses the Edenic to criticize humankind, drawing on the looming threat of chaos and forbidden power which, once humankind has accessed, paves the way for inevitable destruction. For Byron, the boundary preventing a union between us and nature is human ego and carelessness. Religion then features within Romantic poetry to serve both the feelings and observations of the poet. Reflecting pastoral traditions, the Edenic is used to explore a yearning for unity with nature, and furthermore to reflect upon a lack of that unity in the post-industrial world, where enlightenment encouraged individuality and private gain. In Romantic nature poetry, the Edenic symbolizes a yearning for heavenly peace and home, yet the fall of man reveals how strongly we prevent Eden on earth.